I'm the person who has seen this show before.
I'm a person who's never watched an anime.
HiroBabble, we are HiroBabble. HiroBabble, we are HiroBabble. Hey, and welcome back to HiroBabble, episode 2 of Neon Genesis Evangelion. If you're tuning in and checking out this episode but have not seen the first one, highly recommend you watch it. It's just a quick little jaunt over in the link in the description below. After you watch that, though, come on back and we can, treat your ears to our thoughts and opinions on episode 2.
So one thing I want to bring up here, we didn't get any emails since the last episode because we're recording these two episodes at the same time.
So, no judgment, but just know you're on notice.
Exactly. So if you want to reach out to us, it is HiroBabble@gmail.com, HiroBabble. You can also reach out to us at Facebook and YouTube. Once again, the name HiroBabble.
Yeah, and honestly, those are kind of just open forums. You know, if there was a part of the episode or a show that we didn't maybe dive into enough, and you wanted to know what our thoughts were, feel free to just shoot us an email and ask. We're happy to read them on the show and kind of provide a little bit more nuance to, things you maybe wanted to hear us talk more about, but maybe we just spaced on. Either way, feel free to reach out.
Exactly. One thing I'm really curious on is for the people that are listening, are we getting more people that have seen the show before, or are we getting more people that have never seen the show and are trying it along with me?
I would really be curious to see. And I'd also want to know who's watching it again. What are your thoughts to Spencer's critiques or thoughts or feelings on things, given you already know how it's going to play out? One thing I will say, it is a joint email account and Facebook page, so I'm just saying, even if you've already seen it, chances are we might have people that are tuning in that haven't. So maybe just check your spoilers a little. That's all I'll say, though. No pressure, but looking forward to hearing from you. And without further ado, let's just jump right into it in the same way that this episode's just decides to jump right into Shinji getting his ass beaten.
Exactly.
Oh my god.
So, we mentioned that we're recording these two episodes at the same time. We alluded at the end of the last episode that Shinji got his ass kicked.
Yeah.
That's actually the beginning of this episode, but the show is so seamless in how it works that it just picks right back up from where the last one ended.
Yeah, and to kind of recap what that last episode looked like, you have Shinji getting into kind of this clunky suit-up sequence where he's hopping into Eva 1 for the first time. Then this triumphant music, kind of like, oh yeah, the protagonist is going to go kick some ass. It starts playing, he takes the elevator up, and as soon as he gets up to the surface, the episode cuts out. But then, cut to the beginning, right off the rip in episode 2, as Spencer alluded to, he takes a step and then falls, and cannot move anymore.
Yeah, our hero that is about to be the big hero that the music has been telling us he's about to do some real hero stuff, and he falls flat on his face.
Yikes. And not only that, proceeds to just get the shit beaten out of him.
Yeah, it's funny because all the people back at Mission Control are watching him take his first step, and they're like, "It's totally working!
He's doing it! Oh my god!"
And then it's immediately, the turntables.
Yeah, well, and it's tough too because it really, I think, illustrates how in over his head Shinji is. I mean, again, I talked about it in the last episode, but it's such a stark contrast to traditional, mech anime where the protagonist hops in. It's clunky at first, but then they just kind of figure it out and roll with it. And then by the end of the series, they are, a pro. Shinji is a kid, and he's already in a situation where he doesn't know what's going on. His dad, who is estranged, just reached out to him for the first time in presumably years. Mm-hmm. And now he's in a giant mech squaring off against this thing called an angel. And he doesn't really have any grasp on what's going on and is kind of just expected to figure it out.
Yeah, we've got just the hero's journey in general is something I want to talk about because you have this character that cannot even walk. and yet the weight of the world is on his shoulders to defend humanity, and he cannot even in the slightest understand how to work this machine. And it's one thing that, just in general, the hero's journey is always, you start off and you have your struggles and you learn from those to become
call to
something
action,
great.
and then, the training arc, and then,
exactly
the stumble, and then the heroic deed.
It's sort of one of the problems, that I have with, like, say, the new Star Wars, where Rey is just sort of immediately this master level Jedi, right?
Yeah.
There's no
payoff.
Yeah, there's no journey like we saw with, like, Luke or any of those other characters. So I'm excited that with Shinji, we get to watch his, him learn how to be brave, how to do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, and it is interesting too. So, but before we get ahead of ourselves, what were your thoughts going from ending of episode 1 right into episode 2?
It was just seamless. I mean, I actually watched them back to back. I was lucky that we aren't watching this when it came out, where I'm able to do that. I didn't have to wait. I was able to just go next episode and start this. So it was honestly really seamless.
Yeah.
Enough so that I didn't even remember which, at the end of last episode that they didn't fight. So I think, they didn't miss a beat.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't miss a beat, and they didn't pull any punches, because this threw me just right back into the action, which was exciting because the first episode is a lot of setup. It's a lot of, here are the characters, here are your mysteries that you want to know more about, and now let's start giving you some answers.
Yeah, and the action is very much in the background, where Shinji and everything kind of that's leading to the action in the background is very much at the forefront, which I think does a good job at paralleling kind of, and I know I'm not to repeat myself, but the normalcy of the day-to-day lives of the people in Tokyo 3. This is their normal. And I'm not saying that in the way that, like, your favorite corporation is going, the new normal about COVID, but it's kind of in that spot of, they've adapted to it, and this is their new scenario. And that's why helicopters shooting live missiles at a giant walking beak-looking guy, is like, oh, well, get in the car. We're going to go to Nerve.
Yeah. It's really funny because you immediately see the angel basically just rip the arm. I don't know if he doesn't rip it off, but he pretty much takes all the life out of this mech's arm.
Well, and that's what's interesting too. You made a reference to the goop that, like, fills up, and Shinji starts grabbing his arm in pain, and everyone in the control center is like, no, you can't, that's not your real arm, it's okay.
Yeah.
But I think that kind of speaks to what we see later in the episode, planting the callback. We'll come back to it, but it's a lot more real than I think maybe even the command center people are kind of making it out to be.
Exactly.
But yeah, I just, that scene is so brutal because you kind of empathize with Shinji. I mean, when I first watched it, I was like, get in the fucking robot, dude. Come on, do your thing. But then when he gets his ass handed to him right off the rip, you realize he does not have any idea what's going on, and now he's just getting thrashed about by an angel. And what is he supposed to do about it other than just kind of take it?
Yeah. And it's really intense because everybody at Mission Control goes from, oh my gosh, it's totally working, to systems down, everything's down, we have no contact.
Pure panic.
Yeah, there's that scene where, like, I don't know what, his, like, right shoulder gets, like, ripped and all that fluid spews out. And that was such a cool visual.
It was. And the just the way that scene kind of ends with the devil grabbing the Eva's face, and then the jackhammer piston shoots out of its arm and starts hitting the helmet.
Yeah.
Just unreal. And I think is a really, like, it's brutal. Because, I mean, there's music going on in the background, but the thunk, thunk, and then they're like, it's cracking, something's wrong.
It's super visceral. And, like, they do this really cool animation where there's, like, a color inversion where all of a sudden, like, his face is, like, these bright reds and yellows, and it's very cool.
And then, he just gets shot back into that building, and then scene change right to the hospital bedroom, and I think you made a special call out to that.
Yeah, I think that scene is just super cool because first I was like, okay, well, we're gonna do like a flashback before we hop to the rest of the fight to see our hero win. But in reality, that becomes kind of the mystery of this episode, is what happened after that. And so we hop into this moment where Shinji, I think, wakes up and he looks at the ceiling and he thinks to himself, I have no idea what ceiling this is.
Yeah.
And I think that just spoke to me because we've kind of all been there, right?
Yeah.
We've all woke up, even if it was just like a sleepover at a buddy's house, and our brain is so used to waking up in the same area that we expect, and seeing something different can be very jarring. And for him, everything is so new, right? So he doesn't even know what happened.
Yeah, well, and he also he speaks from it as if he has, like, that's his normalcy, experiencing a new ceiling. And I think there's a lot of comfort in a home and having a ceiling that you recognize to your room, to your house or anything in that realm. But then that just kind of ties back into the relationship with his dad. It's apparent that Shinji has kind of just been on his own for the longest time. I mean, we don't know what's going on with his mom. We don't know about any other additional family stuff. We just know that him and his dad are not on good terms. And so, of course, his reaction is another new ceiling. Great.
Yeah. So it goes from that fight scene and that kind of hospital scene to this scene where we have all these sort of bigwigs talking in these, like, there's different color lights, so maybe, one of them is in that physical room that we can see, and the other ones are like, I don't know if they're holograms or projections or something, but a meeting is happening between all people that are in this circle of ultra top secret, and they're kind of briefing each other on, that worked or that didn't go as expected, and you've got people with different opinions, right? And one thing they say that was very cool is one of them says that these angels arrived because of what they had done. And they don't tell you what they did.
Yeah.
So that got my mind really wondering.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, because in that same conversation, they're all kind of comparing notes. And one of the guys goes, hey, your Eva worked, but at what cost? You have to repair it. You have basically to do construction on the parts of the city that were destroyed. It's one of those things where, how viable is it? And one of the guys goes, I heard you gave it to your son. Interesting. And then meanwhile, Gendo is just kind of like, and? He's like, what of it? Because at the end of the day, to him, it was a success. And that's kind of all he needed it to be. Which in reality is really shitty, because it kind of illustrates how he views Shinji, and not even just Shinji, but kind of anyone that pilots one of those Evas. And the scientist Ritsuko with the blonde hair, she makes a call out to that, because they are talking about Eva 1 and how it needs to be repaired.
Yeah.
And then he asks, or he lets Ritsuko know, I think Eva 0 will be operational within 20 days.
Yeah.
And Ritsuko goes, do you think that's okay? Or when it comes to these kids, does it even matter? And there's nothing else said, and then it just cuts to the next scene.
Yeah, it's a very cool scene. It reminded me of a lot of cool sort of sci-fi meetings between leaders, and it was really awesome. The next timestamp that I have is at 6:50. There is a Mitsubishi vehicle, which just reminded me of you because
I do
drive a Mitsubishi.
Yeah, I may have had a hand in Evangelion.
So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I signed an NDA. I can't.
Yeah.
But
so there's this episode focuses a lot on the relationship between Shinji and
Mitsuko?
Yeah, Mitsuko. And so it sort of leads you to believe, like, what is her relationship to him going to become, right? They kind of joke about her and, oh my gosh, the names. What is the blonde scientist that...
Ritsuko.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, they're sort of joking like, oh, he's going to live with you, you know, like...
Yeah, it's interesting because that opens up with Shinji getting assigned his own room, and then Ritsuko's like, wait, or not Ritsuko, oh my god, I'm
I know.
There's so many names.
Well, they're talking to... They're basically giving him a room, and everybody's like, he's gonna live alone.
Yeah.
And he's kind of like...
He's like,
I always live alone.
Yeah, he's like, this is my thing.
Yeah.
And so then Misato steps in, and she goes...
We kind of mixed those two names.
There's a lot of character stuff, and it's tough not to talk about the show without mentioning the names.
Yeah.
Otherwise it gets confusing, but Misato basically volunteers to have him live with her.
Right.
And I made a note, in that first episode, she goes from cheeky and bubbly to really stern and like, do your duty. Like, do your thing. Like, this is your responsibility now. And then, this episode, she's cheeky and playful again. And she has that kind of charm where she's just like, yeah, you know, I'll take him in. You know, I think he needs some company, or, you know, and you're like, oh, okay. Maybe that was just in the heat of the moment or something along those lines.
Right. There's a part later in the episode, not to get too far ahead, but she thinks to herself, like, am I laying it on too thick? And it just makes me wonder, you know, is what she's conversing with him about, that bubbly attitude that she's on the outside, is that just a face that she wears, right, to, you know, to get to an end?
Yeah, well, so one thing, because after she speaks with Ritsuro, or, man, I tell you, Ritsuko and Misato. There we go.
Yes.
After she speaks with Ritsuko, then her and Shinji go to the convenience store. And you made a mention last episode about how this show takes its time. It's not trying to shove a million things at you at once. And one thing I really value about this show is it spends a lot of time in this melancholic stillness. There's a scene in the convenience store when Misato is like, we gotta celebrate, you know?
Yeah,
like now that we're roommates. And there's a scene where it focuses on Shinji. And he just kind of spaces out and it's quiet. Mm-hmm. There's not a single thing going on. And it serves two purposes. One, it kind of just shows that he's spaced out, but I think you also really realize this is kind of his perception of the world. It's very silent and kind of just barren and filled with melancholy.
Sure. And
you kind of get a look into, I don't know, maybe it's like, oh, hashtag too deep, but I think to a certain extent they really hone in on that silence in a really strong way, and then it's cut by those two moms going, oh my goodness, did you see the destruction in the city?
Yeah. We
are just never safe.
Yeah.
And then that snaps him out of it, and then Misato kind of catches, she hears that, and she looks at him and goes, you did great. Like, yeah. We're saving people's lives, you know.
Totally.
Don't sweat it.
There's that same scene in the convenience store. The shop owner she mentions to the characters that, you know, she thinks she's going to close the shop soon because she can't stay open if the city's constantly going to be in danger.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that just brought some realism to this, you know, fictional show. That would be really, really difficult. Nothing in life can be normal.
Yeah.
That's just one of the many casualties of this war that they're now in. Absolutely. You know, and so I thought, that was a really good scene.
Yeah, well, and so then it cuts to them going to Misato's apartment, and it kind of really, like you said, focuses on the dynamic between Shinji and Misato, and kind of just builds on this camaraderie that, kind of like you said, you can't tell if it's genuine, but you also are kind of hoping it is, because you know that Shinji, I think, needs someone in his corner. Mm-hmm. And at Nerve, there isn't anyone that really is outside of Masato who is really trying to, be that person.
Yeah, they have a really good scene together where she takes him to like this lookout at sunset.
Yes.
And they watch these kind of skyscrapers ascend from the ground.
Yeah.
On what must be the most expensive elevators of all time.
Absolutely.
And that was just kind of a nice moment because it shows like she's trying to say like, hey, it's not all bad. Look at there is still beauty.
Yeah.
And we're in this together.
Well, and also kind of just showing too, to a certain extent, I think this is what you're defending. This is why we do what we do, because we are trying to protect views like this.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want this to go away. And the only way that, and again, this is probably a lot of subtext, but I think that it's kind of a dual fold in the same way that you were alluding that her kindness towards Shinji is kind of, there's a duality to it.
I get that hint of duality, yes.
Yeah.
That scene is the first time that she mentions the name, that this is Tokyo 3.
Yeah.
And it also is this trend that I noticed in the first episode too, where about 12 minutes in, they drop the title card with the episode name, which is just an odd observation because they are dropping the title card about halfway through each episode. Typically you would see it maybe at the beginning or at the very end, but it's just an interesting, both episodes, the first one and the second one, have had like a 12-minute intro before the episode sort of starts, right? So just kind of an interesting observation.
No, I completely agree. I think that's a really good take. And I totally missed that too. After the convenience store, she's like, do you mind if we stop somewhere? And then it cuts back to them at the apartment. And that's when she, I think, opens the door and says that line to him where it's like, this is your home too.
Yeah. And it has that just amazing shot where it's a shot on the ground.
Yeah.
Where it shows him. It's sort of like he takes a step from being in this strange place that's all new to him to taking a step to saying, this is now the norm. This is my home. I need to be comfortable with this. And that the shot is just like his feet.
Yeah.
And it's a really cool shot.
And it is kind of like the doorway is in between the dark and the light, which is like, that's a great observation on your part.
He also dogs on her for having a dirty house.
Oh, yeah.
With all the beer cans and all the stuff.
It really reminds me of that meme where it's like, damn, bitch, you living like this? And it just shows a super dirty room, but...
Yeah, I kind of looked at that and I was like, wow, this is kind of every man's dream. You've got this chick that loves to party.
Yeah.
She's fairly smoking hot.
No, not fairly. I'll contest that. She is.
Well, there are some pretty great angles in this episode that would prove that. And I think we all want a woman that just has a fridge stocked with beer, right?
Yeah, and also could probably drink you under the table.
Yeah.
No doubt about that.
Exactly.
But yeah, this scene when they're in the apartment kind of getting comfortable is cool because it's purely just a character moment. You have, like you said, Shinji dogging on Misato for her dirty apartment. She's kind of saying like, well, guess what? Now it's your apartment too, dumbass.
Yeah.
And like, there's a playful banter there.
Right. This party that she throws is them divvying up chores.
Yeah, it cuts to them doing rock, paper, scissors, and you just see her name 4 times, and everything else is just Shinji.
Yep. It honestly, it was fun because it shows the world building that the show was able to do just in that first episode, where you can have all that action and the build up to that action. They give you a tiny bit of it, and then they can take the rest of the episode to pretty much just have this fun apartment scene.
Yeah.
But it's not boring. You're really interested in learning these characters.
Yeah, they really bait you in with the prospect of a cool world to explore and learn more about. And so these character moments are great because you get a small glimpse into the lives of the people that are living in it.
There's a scene where Shinji, where she pretty much tells him, maybe you should go take a bath.
Yeah.
Because that's like nature's cleanser for humans, and you need to get some stuff you need to process a little bit and cleanse yourself of all the BS.
Yeah, because he's hitting her with the yes ma'am, sorry ma'am. Yes. And she's like, God, don't say that.
Yeah.
You're too formal. And it just kind of shows that Shinji is still very tense. But then it cuts to the shower scene.
Yeah. Talk about steamy.
Yeah. Talk about penguins.
Yes. That penguin is cooler than fuck.
He definitely fucks.
He looks really badass. So is the what does she say? That's like the housekeeping penguin in Nerve or something?
No, she just maybe she did. I think to my knowledge just a hot spring penguin.
I mean, is it a recurring character?
I will.
You will reserve.
Yeah, I'll reserve comment on that.
I hope so, because that is very interesting.
Yeah, but so then Shinji does his thing, takes his bath or whatever, and then Misato takes hers, and she has a phone call with the one and only Ritsuko, right?
Yes. No, you're right.
And this is where I think kind of what you were alluding to with, or I'm incorrect. They cut to Shinji taking his bath, and then they cut to, and I think I mentioned this earlier, but they cut to Ritsuko and Gendo talking about EVA Zero and the pilot of EVA Zero and how it'll be 20 days till she's able to pilot again. Mm-hmm. Ritsuko says, are we sure that's safe, or with these kids does it not matter? And Gendo just kind of is stoic about it, as if to say, it doesn't.
Then you can see how badly damaged the mech is.
Oh, the EVA Zero looks busted.
Yeah, it does.
And then it cuts to Mitsuo's bath scene, which, props to the camera guy. Or, sorry, exactly. Where am I getting Misato's bath scene? Goodness. Cuts to her bath scene, and she's on the phone with Ritsuko, and kind of just, they're talking back and forth, and Ritsuko's like, hey, maybe, you gotta get him to loosen up, and she's like, I'm trying, but I don't know if it's gonna take time. And then Ritsuko's like, what do you mean? I thought it was your idea to have him stay with you. Yeah. And she's like, shut up, I can do it. And then
they have a really good back and forth that's like professional, but also like, oh, we've been doing this for a while, we're buddies.
Yeah.
It pretty much cuts from the bath scene back to finishing up the fight. It ties back to the beginning where we can now see what Shinji hasn't been able to remember.
Yeah, I will say though, Misato's phone call ends with her saying, we destroyed the angel, but I don't feel happy. Mm-hmm. And that line, to me, is just very, very telling, because it kind of just speaks to this idea of, I guess, confliction within Misato. Kind of, are we doing the right thing? What's the end goal here? What are we really getting to? And granted, none of that needs to be said, but it's enough to say, if the only thing you cared about was defeating the angels, that should make you happy. So it's apparent that there are conflicting thoughts going on.
Well, it makes me wonder, if the people that are working here at Nerve have any doubt whatsoever whether we're on the right side of this whole thing or not. Mm-hmm. That adds another layer of complexity back to, who created the angels or why they're here.
Yep. But yeah, and then you're right. After that phone call, it cuts to Shinji laying on his bed, just listening to his music and kind of taking it easy. Just very much so, kind of just zoning out.
I think there's a line where Ritsuko, I believe it's her, she says, or maybe it's Shinji's dad, but he says, it's gone berserk. And they start showing that the mech itself has essentially taken over at this point, right? And it's gotten them back in the fight. And that's what we didn't see.
You're talking about the flashback. Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it jumps right back to Shinji, and he has that inverted color palette.
Yeah.
where, he's freaking out, and then that's when the eye lights up on the Ava unit, the mouth opens, and then, Ritsuko goes, oh, it's going berserk.
Right.
And then you just witness Ava 1 kind of just make up for the ass kicking it got in the first 5 minutes of this episode.
Right.
And it's cool because they start talking about AT fields, which haven't really been elaborated on much, but it's basically, from what you can gather, a barrier that blocks out the attacks. Because in episode 1, when they're shooting those missiles, Gendo's right-hand man goes, looks like an AT field, or some...
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, to see basically Ava 1 rip in and tear it apart was nuts. But what were your thoughts on it? Like,
it was absolutely badass. I mean, it's what we all wanted to see, right?
Yeah.
I was intrigued by this plug that seems to be like plugged into the Eva unit.
Yeah.
Like, I was curious if that is the fluid or if that is the power source or what that is. But it's dragging behind him the entire time, which is just the world's longest extension cord.
Yeah. I need one of those in my house. Shoot.
And my immediate thought was, that could be potentially a weak spot, right? Where what happens if you sever that cord?
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know if that becomes a factor later on in the show.
Yeah. So what were your thoughts on the overall fight and how it ended up kind of coming to a close?
It was cool. I mean, the choreography was awesome. It pretty much just took names and kicked ass. From what I can gather, it pretty much beat the Angel down to the point that it was fairly defeated. And then it activated some sort of destruct sequence that put it out of its misery.
Yeah.
And then from the ashes walked the Eva unit like a badass.
Yeah. And but then, for me, the standout part of the whole fight is when it's walking out of this giant wall of flame, and it cuts to Shinji looking in the reflection from that tower.
Yeah.
And you see this flesh-like head, because the mask of the Ava falls off. And then you see this eye bubble up, and it makes eye contact with Shinji.
Yeah.
And it's this weird Inception moment, but it's like, what?
I know. I also I first thought that was like the head of the Angel. Like, it decapitated it and it's taken its trophy home. And then I kind of realized, well, the shape of that is the same shape as the Eva unit. Yeah, very weird.
Yeah, but I just love the way that they basically show you the beginning of Shinji losing, but then, I mean, Shinji technically won, but it's really rocked him to the core a bit, because what he saw was very much so like, one, he is just forever being given more questions than he'll ever get answers to.
Yeah. I mean, I think he has, some PTSD from dealing with that, just because he experienced so much carnage and hardcore imagery so fast.
Well, and when he came to, I mean, I think he probably realized what just happened,
Yeah, Shinji, or, Mitsuko keeps telling him, grow up, be a man,
Oh.
And I feel like this was kind of a moment through this arc of this episode.
You mean Misato? Is that who you're talking about?
What did I say, Mitsuko?
Dude, I've been saying it. I'm throwing you off. That's my fault, yeah.
But
Misato.
She keeps alluding to, like, man up.
Yeah.
We need you to man up, like you were mentioning. And this kind of 2-episode arc is really like him coming to grips with that he can't just be, that kid anymore.
Yeah. Well, and also he's like, well, how do I man up when I'm confronted with something like this?
Yeah.
But I love how that flashback ends, and this is me personally, I should say, and then it cuts to him just kind of having a moment, and then Misato opens the door.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, hey, you did a good thing today.
Yeah, like, by the way, you were a real hero out there.
But she ends it with this very stoic, hang in there.
Yeah.
And it feels like, is she saying that for him, or is she saying that for her?
Yeah. That's the duality that we're talking about. That was one of the most interesting things to me about this episode.
Yeah.
It was really cool. The characters continue to grow in depth, and I think we all got what we wanted, which was the badass fight scene.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think that kind of wraps up the synopsis. as far as my rating,
Yeah.
Out of 10 mechs, I would once again give this 9 mechs. I think that it, the first episode was fantastic. This episode did a good job of breaking up kind of the softer moments, like the party, and then also the more high-intensity moments, like the flashback of the epic duel.
Totally. No, I honestly, I think back to when I first watched it, and each time I watch it, I find myself just so taken aback by that flashback and just the last basically 6 minutes of that episode. I'd give it a 9.5 mechs.
Really?
Out of 10. And primarily because it just does such a good job of, kind of like you said, taking its time. I love the stillness. I love the, like the stillness of those scenes, like in the convenience store with Shinji. I like how they really give the character relationships time to breathe, while also sprinkling in bits of exposition, like when Gendo and Ritsuko talk, or when Misato and Ritsuko talk, and then it cuts back to Shinji and Misato's relationship, and then boom, we're back in the fight scene from the beginning of the episode, and Shinji is having hardcore PTSD, and all that can really be offered after a moment like that is hang in there.
Yeah.
To me, it's such a good mesh of all of these different elements, and I think that it capitalizes on how well the first episode really reels you in, but then just keeps reeling you in while also giving you, like you said, that action and the kind of beginnings of character development for the main cast, which is cool.
Yeah, I think that these 2 episodes are like a perfect introductory arc to this show, because you get the action, you get the humor, you also get, some mysteries, like what is Nerve, what is this organization, how top secret are they, how long have they been dealing with this, did they have something to do with creating or bringing these angels here, what are the angels, that's a big question. Will Shinji rise to become the hero that they want him to be? Will he patch things up with his dad? All those sort of mysteries are still there, which makes me really excited to watch the next episodes.
You and me both, man.
So we have a HiroBabble rating of 9.25 out of 10.
If we're going to average it out, I'd say that's a safe middle ground.
Yeah.
But, hey, thanks for tuning in. This was episode 2, and we are HiroBabble, and we'll catch you on episode 3.
Yeah, tune in next time to see if we can get any of the character names right.
Yeah, honestly, our apologies on that. It's talking about these different characters in rapid succession when there's not a lot of variation is sometimes just jarring. But
how long do you think it's been since you gave this show a full watch through?
I would honestly say it's probably been a good year and a half.
Yeah.
I remember I watched it, I think maybe like over a summer break, not from school, but just over summer. I think I had some extra days off, so I just binged it. But it's one of those where revisiting kind of those memories and feelings of the show come rushing back. And But I will say, I mean, I know the main cast, but sometimes I just get tripped up because I'm like, oh shit.
No, yeah. Well, I think one thing too.
You have the excuse of this is your first time. I should really be.
I'm riding that hard too.
Yeah, please. You should. I should be the one that's honing in on it. But tune in next time where if we call Ritsuko Ritsaka and Misato Mitsuko.
And Shinji Shinjo.
Yeah, Shujo. But anyways, thanks again for tuning in. If you have any questions about today's episode, questions for us, recommendations of series we should maybe check out next, feel free to shoot us an email at HiroBabble @gmail.com. But until next time, stay safe, wear a mask, wash your hands, and take it easy.